All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. In this one, I'm joined by my buddy Rich from the MHRT network. Rich, how's it going, man?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Looking forward to the game. 4-2 Jets coming to Denver to take on the 2-4 Broncos. I got to be honest, like when I saw all of the Broncos offseason acquisitions and, obviously headlined by Russell Wilson, I was expecting, granted, the season's not over, things can definitely change, but I was expecting Denver to really just burst onto the scene, start winning a bunch of games early on, and just ride that wave of momentum into the playoffs and really challenge KC for the AFC West crown. Can you talk about really what you've seen from this Broncos squad so far this season?
Well, I think we saw in early preseason some really promising things as Broncos fans. We saw certainly a different offense. We saw something that showcased a little bit more of what we are used to seeing when we had Rick Scangarello here in, was it 3 years ago now? Now 3 years ago under the first year when Fangio was here. So we had that kind of outside zone style scheme that at this point here, Denver is infamous for running. Terrell Davis, Elway, keep on going, right? And so we've had some tremendous running backs, and under the Mike Shanahan the Shanahan offense was very similar to that as well with that outside zone style. Yep. So anyway, we got some great stuff here, like really, really great stuff here under that style of offense. In fact, Drew Lock had a spectacular back end to his season when they finally, realized that he could play on the football field, and they put him in at the back end of the season, and he came in and he finished the season at 4-1.
Yeah, I know. I remember. People take shots at Drew Lock, man, but I'm not saying he's a top 10, 15 guy or anything like that, but as a young quarterback, like he has the arm strength. Like there's a couple things about Drew Lock that, admittedly I like.
Right. And I think part of the challenge that you have with any offensive scheme or any quarterback or however you want to kind of go about it is they need to evolve into the scheme. So when you look at what Russell Wilson was looking at here, he didn't play in the preseason. He didn't even play a few snaps in the preseason. And while, yes, practice is one thing, and that certainly gets you ready, you're not going against live bullets and you're not going against different looks and different things to kind of get yourself truly ready, because your defense is out there to practice their defensive style as well. And so the challenge you're always going to run into is that you're not really running scout teams when you're in the preseason install stuff in terms of camp and all that thing. And so you're no longer doing the type of things that you're doing in practice. So it's all, in my opinion, it's always beneficial. I mean, especially with a new head coach and a new offensive system, to play one or two series for one or two games, at least for the starters, because you want them to have a much better understanding as to where their deficiencies are. You want them to understand where they really need to work on and where you can't go out and play and when the game actually matters. And you want to be able to then go back to the practice after that and correct those issues. I was of a much different opinion to you, actually. Once I saw us not playing preseason, I thought we were going to have a mediocre start, and then a kind of a gradual improvement. Because when you don't play, you don't practice, you don't do those sorts of things, you kind of potentially have the risk of just being slow as a start. With us, it was just not great. I don't really know how else to put it. It just was not great. And in my opinion, just for I know that's not necessarily the narrative that's coming out of Dove Valley, but in my opinion, after the Seahawks game, or even maybe before the Seahawks game, Russ was missing a lot of those rainbow arc throws that you're used to seeing him make in Seattle. He had one or two of them that looked pretty good. So maybe the second game of the season may have been where he really started getting badly hurt. But part of me looked at the way he was scanning the field. It was just off. It just, nothing about it was right. And he was missing normal throws that he would otherwise make, which I chalked up to a combination of potential injury and new scheme that he never had a chance to practice.
It's interesting because, you look at the team rankings and everything like that. The defense is rock solid. I would say they're elite. I mean, they're one of the best in football. They do a lot of things really, really well. They obviously have the talent as well. But then it's unfortunate. It's strange that the defense is performing at such a high level, but the offense is struggling so much that it results in a 2-4 record. And I couldn't imagine being a Broncos fan watching these games on Sunday thinking to myself, like, man, if the offense could just look a little bit better, if they could just look average, maybe we'd be 500. Maybe this offense would be, able to control the ball and score more points. And there's kind of a big narrative right now. And we talked about this, before earlier in the week.
Yes.
Is it Russell Wilson? Is it Hackett? I feel like more of the blame right now is kind of on Hackett because he's an unproven guy. We don't, a lot of people don't really know how he looks as a head coach. We've seen years of dominance from Russell Wilson in Seattle. So I think it's the default is just to blame the new guy. This guy, he hasn't done this before. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm of the opinion that when you are a quarterback and you command 40 some odd $million a year and you're brought in as a veteran quarterback, that it should be a reasonable expectation that if you're put in a very similar offensive scheme, because Hackett's offensive scheme is, if not first cousins, brothers to that of the Seattle offense. Like, when you look how close they actually are, it's very, very, very similar. Certainly some different route concepts and things like that. So I'm not trying to say they're identical, but I mean, they are so close that if you can play in one, you should be able to then ultimately be able to play in the other.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not. And I mean, by he, I mean Russ. He's just not. He's missing so much that it's rather remarkable. Now, I do have some interesting takes on this, where I'm certainly in probably a minority of Broncos fans, but I'm starting to see, funnily enough, which is always interesting for me to watch play out in real time. I started out the gate saying it's all on Russ. And everyone else was clamoring and pounding the table saying it's all on Hackett. And I kept on telling everyone, you are wrong. I let me show you. And now the narrative has actually flipped, where it's like, now I feel my camp on saying I think it's more on Russ. It seems to have a much larger tent and population within said tent than the one that originally was for Hackett. And part of the reason why I say that is a wide open wide receiver that is missed by a veteran quarterback is not an offensive coordinator or offensive scheme issue. That is a field vision issue, and that ultimately is laid at the feet of the quarterback, not the offensive play caller or the head coach. So just little things like that have happened regularly. I also believe that Russ's injury is a lot worse than he is letting on and the coach is letting on. When you tear that muscle that's kind of just underneath in that shoulder blade area, it is the primary muscle that pitchers use in order to get both velocity and accuracy on a ball. For those of you who don't play baseball, that's a very common pitching injury for Major League Baseball pitchers, which is also why when the Dallas Cowboys, when Dak Prescott had that injury, remember he was benched or sidelined for, I think it was like 4 weeks or 5 weeks, if not mistaken.
Yeah, I feel like Dak gets hurt every season, but
well, I mean, that's a different pod for a different time, and I don't disagree with you, but
I don't even. I mean, I just feel like there's like a laundry list of injuries with Dak. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and he started out being super healthy too. But either way, I digress. The point being is, it's such a specialized injury that typically only happens with baseball players, that the Cowboys actually brought in a major league doctor from Major League Baseball to do all of their assessments, just because that's where the specialization lies, is within the baseball community, not within the football community. And Russell Wilson came from a baseball background, and he said he had never had the injury either. Some people may not realize, Wilson was actually a top-notch baseball player too.
Right. I think he was actually drafted, if I'm not mistaken.
He was drafted. He was actually drafted by the Rockies. If I can digress and go on a slight rant here. When Wilson first came to the Broncos, in his opening presser, he kind of opened up about one of the reasons why he really wanted to come to Denver. And one of those reasons was in his year that he was drafted by the Major League, by the Colorado Rockies, his dad died, like within days of when he was drafted.
That's insane.
And I mean, it's nuts. I mean, you can go back, the presser's like public all over the internet. You can track it down to find it. It's absolutely remarkable. And he said that despite having never had this like long term or like rapport, because he was like, a new guy in the league and all that sort of stuff, a whack of the Colorado Rockies teammates reached out to him on a regular basis and said, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you okay? A real kind of family style atmosphere, and something that he remembered to this day, apparently, and this is what he said in the presser about, the Rockies and Colorado and Denver and all that kind of stuff. Fast forward to when he said, no, I'm sticking with the whole football thing. Got drafted by the Seahawks, and then when it came up for his opportunity to kind of meander and waive a no trade clause, he opted for Denver. And one of the reasons why he said he opted for Denver was because he always remembered that, very positive experience when he was originally drafted by the Rockies and his father passed.
That's super interesting, man. I had no clue. I mean, I knew about the baseball background and everything like that. And it kind of makes you think too, because Russell does have like an elongated throwing motion, and I know he's dealing with a hamstring injury this week. I don't know where it stands like today, like as we're filming this, but at least a couple of days ago, it looks like, I believe the report was it could have been a significant injury.
Yes.
We don't really know where it stands. So where do you stand right now as far as Denver turning it around this season? Like,
No.
do you have faith in the squad that they could actually push for a division crown or a wild card spot?
I think if they're willing to make some very tough decisions, I do believe that they are certainly capable and able of doing something like that. My problem is that I actually don't think the leadership within the Broncos organization is willing or capable. They're certainly able, but they're not willing. And I don't think they will. I just don't think they'll do it to make the needed changes, those tough decisions that need to ultimately be made. As an example, for some reason, we seem to be allergic to swapping out our offensive center. He's been absolutely bullied and pushed around to a point where it's been incredibly detrimental to both our run game and pass game. And really, the shortest direction and shortest area to get to quarterback is right up the middle. And if your weakest lineman is right in the middle, then your quarterback is almost always going to be under pressure. And that has been a consistent issue for the Denver Broncos this season. So in my opinion, I think we need to swap out our offensive center. Our right guard has now come back from injury, which you saw some major improvement to the right side of our line this past game when we played against
Saleh.
it was the Chargers, but I'm trying to forget that game. But we played against the Chargers, and we saw some much stronger runs to the right-hand side where we've kind of just started to see a push where they were able to kind of collapse the linemen on that side. And that was in large part because of our right guard being back in Quinn Miners. If you don't know who he is, if you watch him on tape, he's kind of got mid-length dreads, big, thick dude, D3 guy, but an absolute stud at the right guard position. Still working on some of his pass pro stuff, but as a run blocker, he'll just throw you right off the ball. But the challenge is that you can't have a weak center and a left guard that's struggling as well, because the whole center of your field, this whole center of the line is going to get blown up. I'd like to see Glasgow, who struggled mightily at right guard. He was an absolute turnstile there, and move him to center.
So it's interesting that you're talking about really like the interior of the offensive line, because one of the best players, if not the best player this season for the Jets, specifically the Jets defense, has been Quinnen Williams. And he's, in my opinion, playing at an all-pro level. I mean, the guy just wreaked havoc on Green Bay last week. And, you look at what he's doing in these games. He's stopping the run, he's getting after the passer, and he's really making a big, big difference. And, he was the third overall pick back in 2019 by this Jets team. But this season he looks complete, and he's always been good. He's never been like a letdown or anything like that. He's always been solid, but this season he's just playing like unbelievable football. So, from the sound of it, it almost looks like that could be a major, major strength where Quinnen could just take over the game. I mean, as far as like the speculation goes.
Sure, because I think that he has the physical tools, I've seen some of his stuff, and it's certainly going to be a major concern. He will be the one that I will be personally watching. Is he's got the physical tools to beat out our left guard, I think, who struggled with hand placement this year, which also would also see him struggle with his footwork and then getting pushed down. In fact, he got tripped like 2 or 3 times in the Chargers game against the Chargers interior line. And I mean, I lost count the number of challenges and issues I saw from our offensive center. So, I mean, within those two positions alone, I think Quinnen Williams will have a field day. So he just gets to choose. Does he go solely after the left guard? Does he try to go between the left guard and the center, or does he go just to the right or right up the middle? And he's certainly strong enough to wreak havoc in that regard in positions, especially in players that are weaker and less skilled than he is, because he's done that this year on multiple occasions. And to your point, he did that that was a brutal game. He had one heck of a game.
Yeah, no, it was nuts, man. Especially watching like real time too. Like, it's just like, man, like again, Quinnen's always been good. He's always like made plays here and there, since 2019. But this season, I just feel like it's every game. He's like the best member on the defensive line every single week. It's been crazy. But outside of, the Broncos interior of their offensive line struggling and the Jets' strength kind of in the trenches defensively, what can the Jets do to have success against Denver? Because what's crazy, the Jets, even though they're 4-2, they're still underdogs this week against Denver. The Vegas odd makers, they still favor Denver here. What do you, I mean, if you were, I guess, a member of the Jets coaching staff, where would you try to exploit?
It depends on the quarterback. So
okay,
what I didn't get to finish in the last segment was one of the other things that I would also do to help fix the Broncos is I would personally bench Russell Wilson until after our bye.
And the bye's in 2 weeks, correct?
And the bye's in 2 weeks. So we have the Jets, we have the Jags in London coming up, our next game, and then we have our bye week. So I would give him those 3 full weeks to heal up, get that muscle sorted, and hopefully it'll be pretty much healed up or almost fully healed up or even fully healed up by then, and give that hamstring that long runway to kind of get back to normal, assuming it can even get back to normal, because hamstrings are tricky business, and they can easily get tweaked and hurt again. But he needs that time, in my opinion, if we're going to actually want Russell Wilson to come back and have any semblance of what he can be, and he can be very good. It's not like I've lost confidence in Russell Wilson. I just think he needs to get himself right, because I think his injuries are preventing him from playing to his potential. And I'd like to see Brett Rippon be put in, who's our backup, who not only won a competition for backup, but did so, in my opinion, quite handily with how he was able to play and work through the offensive scheme that Nathaniel Hackett is actually wanting to put on the field. And that is the layered approach on offense, exploit defensive weaknesses. So if I'm the Jets staff and the Broncos refuse to bench Russell Wilson and instead put him on the field, I think your short passes are the ones that you give up, because Russ has not typically done a very good job at recognizing those. Your short dump off passes to running backs, the center of the field right in the middle, I would just not even bother covering the guy, because Russ is not throwing there at all. Just let him loose. Just like, there's video evidence of our last game where we had Greg Dulcich in the middle of the field in a zone scheme with not a defender around him for at least 3 yards minimum in either direction. And Russ completely ignored him and tried to throw a sideline bomb, and it didn't work out. So he's not looking at the middle of the field particularly well. And he's trying to go for the long bombs. So if you're trying to actually stop Wilson and stymie the offense, cover up the back end of the field. So rush fewer and cover more on the back end. And then you can kind of leave the middle of that field open. And that will, by and large, really slow Russ down, because he does not like that middle and short dump pass.
I got you, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on the channel. It's going to be a crazy game. I'm really, really looking forward to it. But yeah, and by the way, all of Rich's links are linked down below in the description: YouTube, Instagram, and of course, Twitter. Yeah, thanks so much, man, for coming on.
Well, I appreciate it. It's been great. Fantastic Jets content here. This is where I go to get my updates for all the New York Jets stuff.
I appreciate that, man.
I think it's honestly awesome stuff. If you guys have any questions for me or want any other information on the game, I do typically troll some of the comments afterwards. And no, I'm not that type of a troll. So go ahead and leave those comments below, or hit me up on Twitter at RichieRiche, and we'll go ahead and have a conversation.
Let's go, man. Well, thanks so much for watching. And as always, go Jets.
Thanks.